killed with an American bomb. The hospitals, the schools, the mosques, the streets, the houses in Gaza, they were bombed by American weapons and the British weapons. I see them as complicit.
Ahmed, I wanted to start on the 22nd of October 2023. What happened on this day?
My father and my two brothers and my three sisters and their children were sheltering in my home. Usually my sisters, because they're married, they don't live in our home, but my family's home is in Deir Al-Balah, which is a safe area compared to many other areas. It was in the south of Wadi Gaza, in which the Israelis said and instructed people to go to. So my sister Wala and 4 of her children, they came to shelter in my home. My sister Ala and 5 of her children, all of her children, came to my home, and my other sister Aya and her 3 children were also sheltering in my home. My older brother is also with his wife and his 3 children, and my cousin also. They all came to my home because my home is located in one of the safest areas in the Gaza Strip. It's in Deir Al-Balah. It's what Sharon called the Deir Shalom, Deir Salam, or the city of peace, for example. My sisters left their homes with their children and came to my home because they thought it would be a safe haven for them. But unfortunately, at dawn, when they were all sleeping with their children, Israel dropped a bomb in my home and killed them all. On that day, I lost 21 members of my family. I lost my father, I lost my 2 brothers, my 3 sisters, and 14 of my nieces and nephews who are all under the age of 13, and also I lost my cousin. There was clearly no militants at the area. There were no missiles fired from my area, no tunnels, no military activity at all in my home, all around my home, like in 1 kilometer around my home. Nothing. Historically, nothing happened in these areas. It is at the center of Deir Al-Balah. It's a very crowded neighborhood. There is nothing could be dangerous in my area. So there's no justification whatsoever for bombing my home. There's no justification whatsoever for bombing 14 kids in their home. Even if there was militants here or there, there wasn't. That doesn't give Israel the right to bomb these civilians. This is what we should talk about. Like, even if there were militants, you can't just bomb civilians, women and children and men. This is a crime. It's a crime. There's no justification for it.
How have you coped with the scale of the loss that has been inflicted on you?
This is a very deep question. Basically, you don't cope with the loss of your family, of all of your family members. But what you do is that you work. You feel that you have a responsibility that is on your shoulders, and you have to live up to fulfill these responsibilities. One of these responsibilities is to talk about what actually happened, to raise the voices of the Palestinian people, to tell their stories to the world, especially here in the UK, especially here in the West, where the West and the Western media, it tries to suppress the Palestinian voices and deprive them of their agency, of their narrative. So what this is I'm living up for right now, to tell the stories of my family, to tell the stories of my people, and to talk about what's actually going on there. Because the Western media is not doing their job.
And you suffered that loss in October, but obviously the plight of the Palestinian people has been a tragedy for 76 years now.
And more.
And more, yeah. You were born in 1994. Can you briefly describe what it was like growing up in Gaza? Because not many people understand what life is like in Gaza for young people.
Well, my first memories was of the second intifada when I was only 6 years old. And I still remember every day going to the school, I would see funerals of martyrs, people getting shot in the streets, tanks invading our city. Tanks invading our city was like a normal daily thing that happens every now and then in Gaza. I would remember many of our neighbors getting shot, many of my neighbors getting killed. Many of my relatives were killed during the second intifada. So this was our daily routine, getting acquainted to the sounds of the bullets, the sounds of the Kalashnikov, for example, or the M16, the sounds of the helicopter, the sounds of the F-16s, the sounds of the tanks invading our city. So these were our memories. Protests, funerals, tanks, airplanes, shooting here and there. This is what our life was about. I still remember every day, like we would spend hours and hours watching the news. And everything we remember, everything we would see is the scenes of the Palestinians getting shot, the Palestinians getting murdered, the scenes of the protests, the tanks, the war. So this was our childhood, a childhood that is mixed with blood, with killing, with getting to know these killing machines that were surrounding us and besieging us.
And who did you grow up with? You grew up with your mum, your dad, and how many siblings?
Well, my mom, my dad, and 8 siblings. So we were a very big family.
What did your dad do for a living?
My dad used to work in construction, like hundreds of thousands of people. They used to work in Israel, inside Israel, because this was the only job that they could have, to work in Israel. Humiliation was a daily routine, because I still remember many stories that my father used to tell me when he was in Israel. For example, every time when they go to Israel, they have to cross the border, and they will check, they were humiliated, they were like, in many cases they were arrested. My father was arrested many times for no reason. They would just like put them in prison for a few hours or one night or two, and then leave them for no reason. Many times they were like checked, and they were stripped naked during these checks. And many stories also my father told me about how the Israelis would treat them, how they would humiliate my father and his colleagues and his friends. One story, I still remember it. I was only 5 years old. That was before the second Intifada. And my father told me that, he was not telling me personally, he was telling like all of the family, that one of his Israeli bosses told him that all the non-Israelites are just animals. They were created just to serve the Jews. And then they were disgusted, the Jews were disgusted with the shape of these animals. Then they asked God to transform them into human-like animals. And at first I thought this is just only a single story, only one individual who said this story. I did not believe that many others believe in this story. Until in this war, we heard the Minister of Defense, he said that we're dealing with the human animals. And of course, I do not generalize, not all the Israelis think this way, of course not. But my father had to endure listening to stories like this, comments like this, racism like this, humiliation like this. It was happening all over. My father would go every day at 2 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. to catch a bus to go to Tel Aviv. Then he would return at 7 or 8 p.m., only to sleep for a few hours and then go again in order to survive. And so many people would wonder, why would Palestinians who are refugees would accept to themselves going to Israel and work as laborers in Israel? That was the case for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. It is because Israel crippled the economy of Gaza. They meant to make the Palestinians depend on the Israelis for their economy, for their living, so that at any point they can close the border and leave all of the Gaza unemployed. Unfortunately, Israel destroyed our factories, it destroyed our farmlands, destroyed all things that would give economy, a way to life and economy to Gaza, in order to make the Palestinians dependent on the Israeli army. And this is what happened. When they closed the border in the year 2000, it crippled the economy in Gaza. Everyone was jobless. That's why many thousands of them resorted to work as taxi drivers.
What was it like living under the blockade? What changed?
I was still very young. Ever since I lived under this blockade, under this collective punishment. So if you want to know what that means, I would tell you that the Israelis were counting the calories that enter Gaza in order to make the Palestinians just survive and not die of hunger. So I still remember that when I go to the shop, for example, I could not find a bar of chocolate. A bar of chocolate was a luxury thing to have. That was in the first few years of the siege. There was no electricity, only a few hours of electricity a day. There's no gas. no oil to run the cars. My father was a taxi driver. There was no gas to run his car. So do you know what he did? He used vegetable oil to run his car. And it worked, but it was very expensive and it destroyed the engine of the car. Eventually, after a few months, it destroyed the engine. But my father had to run his car in order to work, to have any job. We did not have gas at our home, so my father would go every day in the morning during Ramadan. I still remember these memories very vividly. My father would wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and he would go and collect some wood in order to make fire, to cook for us something to have like before sunrise in Ramadan, because we're fasting. To that extent, it was very, very severe. No gas, no electricity, no clean water. Like, we don't have clean water in Gaza. And even the sewage of Gaza, because we did not have electricity to run our desalination plants, the municipality would pump the sewage water into the sea. So every day when I go to university, I would smell, like when you pass by the sea, you would smell sewage. The sea was full of sewage because we can't treat our water. So no water, no electricity, no food, nothing at all. And all the factories in Gaza were closed. It was very difficult. It was very difficult, especially when you are a kid.
The first major Israeli aggression against Gaza happened in 2008-9.
Yes.
Can you remember that?
Yes, I remember it very vividly, of course.
What was that like?
It started when I was at school waiting for an exam for me. I think that was 12 or 11 in the afternoon. And I was very anxious because I had an exam, and then suddenly I felt like it's afterlife. It's the judgment day. Why? Because in just 1 second, I heard 4 huge explosives that happened around my school, and it was of governmental buildings and stuff. And I panicked a lot. It was one of the major wars back then for me. And I looked and I saw columns of smoke coming out near my school. And then I immediately run out of the school like all other students. Then we went out of the school. Then we were shocked with the scenes that we saw. Many people were killed in the streets. All of them were cops, policemen, and governmental buildings, cars running. And at that moment, I felt like this is actually a war. That did not happen before. We spent like another 30 days during this war staying at home. We did not go out because you could be at risk of dying. And my uncle, he lost his home back then in the war, and he left his home just only a few hours before it was bombed. But luckily, I did not lose any relatives, any close family members during this war. It was a major war, and we were children, and we the Palestinians, we do not enjoy wars. We don't like wars. Unlike what you see maybe in the news, we do not like it. So during wars, we would try our best to forget about the war, about the horror, and find any way to bring us solace and comfort, especially when you are kids. So we used to spend our time like playing cards at home, so we forget about what's going on outside. But yeah, it was a major war, but luckily we did not lose anyone during this war. The year 2014, it was a more severe war, more brutal war. And that was the first time I lose a family member. It was my brother.
What happened to your brother?
He was bombed with many of my friends, and they were killed.
And what impact did that have on you as a young man?
I was only 19 years old back then, and my brother, he was my friend as well, because he was only 4 years older than me, so we'd spend our time together. So it crushed me. It left me so depressed, and the war ended, and the only feeling I had is that I just want to die just like him and follow him. It was difficult to explain, but it was brutal. And seeing your brother who you used to spend your time with, and he came when they brought him back home, he was like cut into pieces. Like he lost his leg and his arm, and his face was all in the blood. And many of my friends were also killed in this war. You watching them in this state, it was crushing.
How did you escape that depression, that trauma?
I wrote a story about him, about my brother, and that changed my life. What happened is that during wars, when you lose family members, when you lose friends, when your country is bombed, and when you watch the news and you feel like everyone is looking down at you, that your loss doesn't matter, that your lives don't matter, especially in the Western media, because I used to read English, you feel that you don't matter anymore. Like, you can lose your brother, and then he would be described as a terrorist, just like that. No one cares about you, no one hears your stories. And even in Gaza, during that war, 2,300 people were killed. So your story was like one among many, among hundreds of thousands. So you would feel that you are in limbo. No one cares about you. But when I wrote my story, when I wrote about my brother, for the first time, I received comments and messages of sympathy and support from people I don't know. And it made me feel like, our life matters, and our stories matter, and some people can care about us. Some people want to hear our voices, want to hear our stories. So that changed my life in a way. It helped me. It was like a stress release. It made me feel like there is a purpose to my life, that we need to do more of that.
And you're also involved in the founding of We Are Not Numbers, which trains Palestinian journalists to write stories like you wrote about your brother to help them get their word out to the world. Rafat al-Hariya, the poet who was assassinated by Israel in December, he was involved in the founding of that, wasn't he?
He was one of the co-founders.
Do you think this is part of Israel's strategy? Because it doesn't seem to me to be a coincidence that there's so many professors, intellectuals, writers, poets being killed. Do you think they're trying to destroy the all kind of cultural life in Gaza?
That's evident, of course. Yesterday I was meeting with a university professor who managed to escape the war in Gaza. And he told me that all the university professors that he knew were killed by Israel. They were assassinated. He told me that 73 university professors, the top university professors in Gaza, were killed. We also knew that Israel was targeting the surgeons in Gaza, the doctors in Gaza. They were targeting, they demolished, they bombed all the universities in Gaza. 350 other schools were bombed. They were targeting even peacemakers, poets, writers. So they wanted to destroy what gives lives to Gaza. And it was very, very evident during this genocide. It's very, very sad.
What we've seen in the past months has surpassed anything I think we've seen, maybe even the original Nakba in 1948. Can you talk about what it's been like for the past 7 months, watching your people and your country just be decimated by this horrific genocide that we're watching?
I don't know how to answer this question, Matt, because these people are my people. These houses that were destroyed are our houses, our universities. My university was bombed. The hospitals I used to receive treatment for was bombed. The places in which we recorded our films and documentaries for We Are Not Numbers, they were all destroyed and bombed. The people who I have worked with, they were killed. My colleagues were killed. Our writers were killed. It's like everything you care about, everything you long for is destroyed in just a few months, and you're watching from out there, from London, watching. And sometimes the most prominent feeling, the overwhelming feeling I have is the survivor's guilt. I always think of myself, why did I only survive from my family? Why I am the only one? Why I'm enjoying life here in London? I'm not enjoying, to be honest, but at least I'm living in safety. At least I have electricity, I have food, I have water. I can meet with people and go and travel here and there while my people are dying, are literally dying. I can have food while my people are starving. So it's very difficult to put what I feel in words because no one will understand unless they live in such circumstances. And I do not want anyone in the world to live what we're living or to see what we're seeing.
You said before to me that you're in some ways jealous of the people, of the martyrs that got killed because they're not in misery like the rest of the Palestinians. Do you still feel like that?
Very, very strongly.
Yeah.
Sometimes because my family was killed at the beginning of this war, I feel like I'm happy for them. That's good news because they will not live to endure all of this pain and suffering and starvation and humiliation and fear. Because if you live in Gaza, you have been living under constant fear. At any moment, you will feel like you can die. This is what Maysara Rais told me, my friend who was killed with his family. We were talking, and he said, every time, I'm quoting him, he said, every time when I'm meeting with my family and we're cracking jokes in this war, I feel like other people were under the same position and suddenly, in just a moment, they're under the rubble. And he was fearing that he might stay under rubble while he was alive and no one could rescue him. This is what happened to him. Suddenly, his home was bombed and he and all of his family were killed in this bombing.
Can you say quickly who Maysara Rais was? Because he was an amazing man, but he was a Chevening scholar that came from Gaza to study in the UK, right? And then he went back. He was on the way to being one of the most top surgeons or top doctors in Gaza. And he was targeted by the Israelis in November, is that right? Yeah. And when he, as you say, like his big fear was being just put under the rubble, and that's what happened. And then a couple of days afterwards, his brothers went back to try and dig him out, correct? Yes. But what happened then?
Two of his brothers were not in their home when the bombing happened. So they would go every day in order to dig with their bare hands to retrieve the bodies of their family. And then the Israelis bombed their brothers again and they killed them.
While they were trying to dig him out?
While they were trying to dig their family out.
What effect has it had watching Joe Biden, President of the United States, get up in press conferences and say, we support Israel's right to quote unquote defend itself. We won't stop arms sales. Do you blame the US for the plight of the Palestinians as well? Because Israel is a small country, of course. It's 9 million population, it's about the same as London. Its GDP is smaller than Sweden. It could not survive a day, really, without the US as its main sponsor. Do you blame the US for the plight of the Palestinians as a whole?
I view them as I view Benjamin Netanyahu. They're the same people. They literally killed my family. I blame the Biden administration, of course. I don't blame the American people. I don't blame the British people. I blame these ruling classes who don't care about the Palestinians, who only care about the safety of the Israelis, who only care about the prosperity of the Israelis, and they don't view the Palestinians as equal human beings. I see them as complicit. They're not just far complicit, they are actual direct complicit in the wars against the Palestinian people, because my family was killed with an American bomb, with an American F-16. That's what killed my family. The hospitals, the schools, the mosques, the streets, the houses in Gaza, they were bombed by American weapons and the British weapons. So they are all very, very, very complicit. They are the ones who killed my family, along with Israel. Israel only pulled the trigger, but it was a colonial project that was brought up by, it was the creation of the UK. Israel is the creation of the UK. It was the creation of Balfour Declaration. They created this entity in our home, and they have been supporting it ever since.
And what do you, because you mentioned that you drew the distinction between the US government and the American people, and the UK government and the UK and the British people. What's your experience been like with the British people and also the American people, because you've been in a lot of American media? Like, have you, the governments aren't reflecting the will of the people, is that correct?
Of course not. Yeah. You know, one of them, why I survived this bomb, this genocide and what happened to my family, it's because I was surrounded with amazing people here in the UK. The British people are amazing people. They're lovely, they're warm, they have supported me, they have went to protest every Saturday. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the British people. But the British government is different. And it's very painful that we see that the British people have a will, And the government knows about the will of the British people, but they're not listening to their people. So it made me like realize that this is not actually a democracy, because if it is a democracy, these people would have been listened to. They deserve to be listened to. The Americans are the same. The American people have been demonstrating. We have seen the American universities and the students, they are protesting for days, and they're like sacrificing their careers, their future, for standing up for Palestine. So I drew a huge difference between the people and the governments. And the governments and the ruling class are the minority. The people are what we count on. The people is what we respect. And I will never, never equate the people with their governments.
And just to go back to what you were saying about the campus protests in the US, I mean, it's historic. It hasn't happened since Vietnam in the 60s. How does it? What message would you give to the American students who are, as you say, risking a lot for the future to stand up for Palestine in the country that is the most complicit outside of Israel with what is happening? What's your message to them?
My message to them is that I love them very much. I love what they're doing. What they're doing brings hope to me. In a time that is very dark, it's very bleak, they give me a glimmer of hope. That the Palestinians are not forgotten, that the cause of Palestine is not only for the Palestinian, it's a universal cause. Because as long as Palestine is not free, everyone is not free. And Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And as long as we don't have justice in Palestine, all the humanity, all the world is at risk of they're endangering their justice. So what the American students and the British students doing in their encampment and their protests, it is really, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very well, and it gives me a lot of hope, a lot of hope. They are heroes. They are the heroes of Palestine. And we want to see more. We want to see protests in all of the universities. And by the way, we don't want only to see the protests at universities. We want encampment in other places. For example, I want an encampment at the BBC because they were complicit in this war in Gaza. The BBC and Sky News and Talk TV and all of these publications and mainstream media who were silencing the Palestinians, who were providing cover for Israel, we need to protest at them, at their place, and we need to encamp there. We also need an encampment at next to the parliament in the UK, because they have been playing a role in this genocide against the Palestinians, and at Downing Street and everywhere. We need to intensify our work because it's clearly that the politicians don't listen to us, so we have to escalate. And I want to say escalate, but in a legal and a peaceful way. I don't want to see anything illegal happen in the UK or in the US. We want legal action, but clearly we need action. Because this can't go on. This can't go on.
What does justice look like for you now? What would you like to see happen that could bring justice to your family and all the other martyrs that have been killed in Gaza?
I want to see everyone who is complicit in these war crimes to be trialed in The Hague and put in a prison. If they are guilty, they should be put in a prison. They should find accountability. You can't just go in one day and kill 30 or 40,000 people. Most of them are women and children, and just get away with it. And you are received in America, in the UK, as a hero or as a politician. These people are criminals, and they have to find justice. You can't just go and kill people and destroy their houses, their hospitals, their schools, their mosques, their churches, the infrastructure of an entire country, and just get away with it. It can't happen. If it is allowed to happen in Gaza, it will happen somewhere else. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen in Gaza, because we are not less worthy of people than any other people. Killing a human being is wrong. You can't allow it to happen. You can't. The UK government, they can't just meet with Netanyahu and these criminals and talk with them in any way possible. These people should be put in prison. All diplomatic ties should be cut with Israel. You can't pretend that you are a democracy, that you are like a liberal country, and you're meeting and you're having economic ties and diplomatic ties with a country that kills women and children, that sees the children, the Palestinian children, as as people that deserve to be targeted and killed. These are not normal human beings. Those who are willing to kill humans should not be treated like civilized people are. It's wrong. It can't happen.
Yeah, I agree with you about the complicity of the British government. I mean, at Declassified, we've done countless stories now for months about the different elements of British complicity in the Gaza genocide. And that ranges from weapons to military transport flights, which are going nearly daily from RAF Akrotiri, our base on Cyprus, to spy flights over Gaza, which there's now been 200, and intelligence sharing with the Israelis, to vast diplomatic support, and we're training Israeli soldiers in the UK while the genocide is ongoing. So I think Britain is materially complicit, not just complicit, we are materially complicit with the genocide, and any ICC investigation and prosecution of Benjamin Netanyahu and his ministers should also include British ministers. What's been interesting for me doing this work for the last 6 months has been how little has been reported in the mainstream media in the UK. The media is not interested in revealing the UK role. In fact, it does not exist in the mainstream media. That's outrageous by itself, but it's also outrageous when you consider what a small organization like Declassified, the effect we've had on the debate in other places. Like in Cyprus, for example, I mentioned the base we've got there, RAF Akrotiri, where US Air Force planes are also delivering weapons to Israel to use in Gaza. There, our stories have created such a scandal that there's been countless protests at the British base and in the city nearby called Limassol. And none of that has been reported in the mainstream media. We've even had the president of Cyprus and the president of Northern Cyprus responding to our investigations, and still it hasn't entered the mainstream media. And again, it goes to what you're saying, the mainstream media is complicit. If they are not covering this stuff, not revealing it, and not revealing the pushback that they're getting from the Cypriot citizens, they are complicit in the genocide. The last example, which I think is one which may be the most important in terms of British complicity, is the role of the UK Special Forces in Gaza. Because early on in the genocide, it was reported in the Sun newspaper that the SAS had deployed to Cyprus for Gaza operations. The following day, a D notice was sent out by the UK military. A D notice is a censorship order, basically, to the media to not write anything about the Special Forces' involvement in Gaza. Since that day, not a single journalist has written anything about Special Forces in Israel or Gaza. Now, if they know what's going on in Gaza involving the SAS and they're not publishing it, that makes them complicit in the genocide, because they're withholding information from the public which might put pressure on the government to stop that complicity. And my hunch is, knowing how Special Forces operate, is that the Special Forces are in Israel, probably in an advisory capacity, advising the Israeli military on how to, on their ground operation, but they may be in a combat role, and we may never know. The SAS, the SBS, and other Special Forces units, they are completely secret, more than even MI5 and MI6. You are not allowed to know a single thing about what the Special Forces do. And they've been at war, we've been at war in Yemen, in Syria, Libya, many places that no one has ever known about. So we need maximum exposure and openness from government and pressure to be brought on government so we know the full spectrum of British complicity. And I would hope if the ICC and the ICJ do their job, they request this information from the British government, because we can't get it as journalists, but legal institutions have different ways of getting that information. And as you said, you would like to see the Israeli ministers at the ICC. I would like to see the British ministers. They should all be brought before the ICC. Let's see if that happens.
And we know for sure that some British nationals fought within the Israeli army.
Of course.
So I think these soldiers who fought in the Israeli army, and we know how many war crimes the Israeli army have committed in Gaza, these people should be brought to justice. These people should be trialed for their involvement in a terrorist organization. The Israeli army is a terrorist organization. There is no doubt about it. And the UK should not allow their nationals to fight for journalist organizations.
I think I agree, and I don't think there's any difference from returning fighters who have been fighting with ISIS, and they're arrested here. Some of them have been stripped of their nationality. We should be treating anyone who's been fighting in the Israeli occupation forces in exactly the same way. We should put them on trial for war crimes, and in fact, some countries have said they might start doing that, and Britain should follow. And that obviously, as Israel is a settler colony, any person who can prove their Jewish heritage can go and live there. So there's foreign fighters from all over the world that are fighting in the Israeli occupation forces in this genocidal army. So all of them need to be brought to justice alongside the ministers. And just to go back to what you were saying about the media, so it's clear how the government is complicit, but it seems to me, and it seems you agree, the genocide now, also the past 76 years of oppression could not have happened without the complicity of the media, because the media is not only silencing the Palestinians, yes, but I think even worse is amplifying Israeli propaganda without any journalism. They're not doing journalism. For example, at the start of the genocide, all these lurid conspiracy theories about what had happened on October 7th were repeated in the media without any criticism. They nearly all turned out to be incorrect. Like, for example, baking babies in the oven, which is a piece of propaganda that Rafat al-Hurriya made fun of on Twitter and was killed for. And then the mass rapes is turning out to be a fake and was published in all the mainstream media. So can you just talk about the complicity of the mainstream media and the journalists in the West in this genocidal assault on Gaza? Are they directly complicit?
Of course they are complicit, of course, because, for example, the stories of the 40 beheaded babies. It's one Israeli soldier said this word and it's spread all over the media. They didn't only talk about it, it was on the front cover of most of the newspapers here in the UK. Everyone was repeating the lie again and again and again, without security, without investigations, without proof, without anything. They just would follow the cue from the Israeli army. The rape, the massacre, they were talking about rape as it's like fact, like it's established fact. And then after digging, we realized like there was no mass rape. Rape was not used as a weapon of war by the Palestinian resistance, for example. And also, like the language that they used to describe the Israelis and the Palestinians was very, very wrong. For example, the BBC is notorious for this. Every time an Israelis are killed, the Israelis are killed, but the Palestinians just die. We just lose the Palestinians. They like to die, the Palestinians. And the representation, how many times they're quoting the Palestinians compared to how many times they're quoting the Israeli army, the footage that they see. And this, we can talk for hours about that, because I did my master's on this. I did my dissertation on the Western media coverage and how biased they are. And everyone knows that they are biased. But also they're cowards. They're cowards. You know, now for the past 7 months, not an international journalist went to Gaza to report the news from there. Why? Because the Israelis are not allowing them. What about your courage? Why can't journalists go there and enforce themselves to go there and report the news? The BBC only went to Gaza in the Israeli tanks. They were shown what the Israeli army want them to see, but they did not challenge the Israelis. They did not go and report what's happening actually on the ground. Why? Because they are cowards, or because they're simply not interested in providing the truth to the people. So they're complicit, they're coward, and I will not forgive them. For the last day of my life, I will not forgive the Western media.
We Are Not Numbers, your organization, is all about rehumanizing Palestinians because they're the most dehumanized people in the world. Do you ever, you've lived your whole life, and particularly in the recent period, like in extremely difficult circumstances and situation, but do you ever have moments of hope for the future, for Palestine, for yourself, and for humanity? And if you do have those moments, what gives you hope?
I had a lot of moments of hope during this genocide. Many of them came to me when I watched the protests that happened in London and all around the world. The people stand with Palestine. The people stand with justice. The British people stand with human rights, with equal human rights for everyone. When I see people in hundreds of thousands continue to protest, I haven't seen this anywhere in the world. I haven't seen it for any other cause except for the Palestinians. And that gives me a lot of hope to see that young people are risking a lot and they're staying in the cold or in the warm weather day and night because they care for human rights, they care for justice, they care for freedom for the Palestinians who are living thousands of miles away from them. It gives me a lot of hope to see university professors and students in the US getting jailed, having their future maybe at risk because they care for Palestine and they care for justice and for freedom. All of this gives me a lot of hope. So I'm saying that I'm not saying that we will have Palestine free within the next month or next year, but I am sure that Palestine will be free. I'm sure that the Palestinians will be free because the Palestinian people are very powerful. I know my people. I know my family. I've lived there. I am one of them. They are the most dignified people. They are the most human people. They are the most powerful people. They're the smartest people. And they will continue to be resilient. They will continue to fight for their rights until they have them. Anyone who studies history knows that no matter how long occupations last in foreign countries, they will have to end one way or another. It can take a year to a lifetime, 100 years, but eventually occupation will end and the people will be free and the people will have their rights. And Palestine is not an exclusion. It's not different.